Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Property Management Show with your hosts, Marie and Brittany. The Property Management Show is brought to you by 4.5, a marketing agency for, well, property managers just like you.
Stop wasting time and money on blind trial and error. Let us 4.5 go ahead and create a plan to attract, nurture, and win those owner leads.
Yep. Today's episode, we're going to be speaking with the lovely Dave Gorham from Realty Solutions in New Jersey.
He's going to be talking about standardizing a property management business and why your idea of how to standardize may not actually work. Stay tuned.
Dave, welcome to the Property Management Show. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. So excited to be finally asked and to be here with you guys.
We're so excited that you're joining us because obviously I love you and now Marie
Has been introduced
to the love.
Right. We've had a long history.
Yeah.
I like it.
I know. It's always good to bring like friendly faces on the show. Because then I'm less awkward, or maybe I'm more awkward, who knows? But let's get into what we're talking with you about today. So this is going to be actually part of a two-part podcast that we're going to be doing, talking about first standardized systems and kind of your take on that for the property management industry. Before we get into that, for people that don't know you or new listeners, can you tell us, we always do this, tell us a little bit about yourself and why we should care about what you think or your opinion.
Yeah. Well, you should care because I pay you guys to be my content manager, right? So
we like money.
Everybody likes money. So my name's Dave Gorham. I'm the broker of record and owner for Realty Solutions. We're a New Jersey-based property management company. We're actually more of a real estate management company. So we look at our the scope of our work as a life cycle of an investor or an investor's property, like from birth to death, basically. And sometimes it is death, right? So we built our company around that. So it not only is it a property management company, we have a brokerage, we also have a community management company, we have a law firm. All of those things work very well to be either interchanged or a client to use all facets of it. So we're not a one-stop shop kind of system. We're really more about what's the best exit plan for the client and then how do we fit. So we do that in New Jersey. We're a regional company, state company, and we've been doing it for over 20 years.
It's always nice to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Most of them successful.
Hey, that's all that matters. Successes. So how about we start with the basics? So to our listeners, how would you define a standardized system? And can you provide like just examples of what that means for a property management company?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was talking to you, Brittany, about at us as a client was having a calendar, right? Having an event history, having something to be trackable, right? So I look at it as any standardized system. It could be a piece of paper, right, with a pen. It's giving yourself a trackable history so that you can measure results. That's it. As simple as that for me. And the idea of like the Uber end of having a standardized system would be, property management software, accounting software. I bring a level of leadership to the company that we've got standardized systems to just about everything we do. Not in a Uber way where people are very rigid, but just to give them enough guidance that when they bump into a rail or they're crossing over into another department, that they have the warning signs that, oh, that's moving to a different department or a different area that I need to loop someone else in. So it kind of gives it it's kind of weird, right? So in a sense where it's rigid, it's a system, it gives the user the freedom to do their job better, right? It frees us up in a lot of psychic energy on what we should be doing because we know what that standard system is. How's that for an answer?
That's great because that means you're just saying anything from, it could be like internal communication system to what happens when somebody signs up for your services.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe what happens when somebody wants to sell a property. I mean, it's all these things.
Yeah.
So you said you don't want it to get too rigid. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people
fear, right?
Yeah.
That when you have a standardized system, everything's going to be rigid. You're not going to be nimble enough to change.
Right. Or like you said, it's not necessarily, it's like the fear, but it's also how deep do you go?
Right.
Like when do you decide that it's not up for debate, but
up to people's judgment.
Standardized system versus case by case scenario.
Yeah, it's great. So you're kind of stepping into a little bit of the challenges I have in training people to embrace the system, right? Whatever the system is. Let's just say it's Outlook, right? So we were talking earlier about what, how long have you been using a system? Well, I've been using a system since I was in college. It may have been a piece of paper telling me what to do that week, but in this realm of business, we started out with Outlook. So I think what you're saying, Brittany, is some of it is a fear of not being able to be nimble enough in your job. But that fear is easily dissipates once you start using the system. Because what ends up happening is you don't have to rely on figuring out what you're going to do next. You know exactly what you're going to do next or what the next step is. What you're now freed up in doing is using your creativity and your critical thinking to do a better job.
Yeah.
Right? So it's either to do a better job with working with you guys on this podcast or one of my property managers doing a better job with her vendor that she's struggling with. Right? So she can actually have a critical thought and be creative with that vendor because she knows that she's tracked everything else.
Right.
Right.
You're not spending time figuring out a problem that that doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. What do you have any examples of times where people think they're using standardized systems, but they aren't?
Yeah, I think maybe a better way to ask is like, I guess the answer really is we're all using some sort of system. It's what are the triggers that show you it's not working for you anymore, that you have to actually make a different one or enhance the current system. So we've done that. And I think you guys too, we're going to do a lot of shameless plugs, right? So you guys are using a rent scale, right?
Yep.
Right. So just from that standpoint, what was your experience with that? It was, they brought in their coaches, right? These guys that come in and say, all right, let's break down your business so that you could talk about it better.
Right. That's
so
a perfect example, like sales processes within any company. Yeah. We just talked about that the other day. That's so funny. Yeah. Where it's like, you have a process, you do the motions, but
is it repeatable?
Yeah.
Right. And it's not, well, I shouldn't say it's not repeatable. It's not scalable to another person or another team member in the business, right? So when I ran the business, so my business partner is an attorney, so he runs the law division. Without him being a leader and me being a leader, we couldn't expand those two divisions to be able to talk to each other. So I've got to have, I could run this business all by myself, but I couldn't scale it.
Yeah.
Right. So when I hire someone else, the scalability comes from what can be repeatable.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you don't have those systems, it creates a bigger barrier to scaling, but you just have to consume a lot more of your time to get to that point.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us to one of our questions we had too. When do you start this? And like you said a couple minutes ago, you can always have a system.
Doesn't mean it's working.
Yeah. So when do you start the process to make it easily transferable to somebody else?
Yeah. So great question. So you start at the beginning. Whenever you start, you have to start, right? You have to start using it. So I just had a great lunch with some colleagues, some competitors, and the client, all at the same table. So I'll give you two stories, right? So one story about a system is a gentleman who's restarting his brokerage, very small, right? With a lot of freedom right now. So for him, he needed to buy software to help him move his business forward in what he didn't have yesterday, right? So his business might be 5 years old. Today he's starting fresh. It's really starting the business right now. So he's buying software to run the brokerage, right? Those aspects. So that's going to be a system that he can track in moving forward. And he's small. He's got a small team. So he'll be able to scale that. The conversation around the table was about a mutual client that we all had, that we now, Realty Solutions now has taken on. We've helped that client get out of hot water, basically, with his business, right? So I remember talking to this client 5 years ago when he had 20 properties, self-managed. You have to have a system to continue to do this, right? So not only am I networking and helping, I'm also, upselling to him, and he knows it, right? Is like, use us when you get to X. At the conversation was 50, right? So for him, he moved to 50, and the conversation was, hasn't the business changed? Yes, it's changed dramatically. All right, now's the time to get serious. You need a system. You need software. You need something to drive it forward. You need to hire a full service property management company, right? Then we talk again another year or two, and he's at 90. Right. For him, shit's hitting the fan.
Wow. He's managing
90, right? So he gets to that position where now he has his own property management company under himself. He's self-managing. The conversation's still around struggling around systems and controlling it all. Because it's the idea that with him was at 20, he had the same struggles that he has now at 90, but now it's compounded by the sheer quantity of it all.
Yeah, it's more stressful.
Yeah. 2 years later, he's coming to us in a panic with 150 units. And at that point, the units, the portfolio is in jeopardy, right? Because at some point it's being mismanaged, not out of malice, not out of not understanding the business, just again, out of not having a standard system and not having a grasp of the whole thing. So for him, his saving grace was hiring a professional property management company,
right?
Which he hired us. Of course, we're the best.
Right, because he owns all of these properties, right?
Yeah.
So he's still making money.
Yeah,
Minus a lot of money, hopefully, if he owns 150 properties. Let's hope he's making money.
So all of those moving parts could not be tracked, nor could it be measured, because I couldn't tell you sitting in front of him whether or not he was profitable or not.
Yeah.
There's nothing to measure. I couldn't tell you the history of a tenant because there was no trackable system to it. So we had to, like a normal business, we had to start from scratch for him and integrate his idea of his business into ours, which was very heavily systemized. And he, just like my team, as they grow, they struggle with the systems that they have to learn as they go up the ladder, right? This client had to learn, hey, this is how we got to do it. In order to save you and the portfolio, it has to be systematized. So that was a really great learning experience for me, client relations, but also for my business.
Yeah. How was the resistance in that situation?
Heavy.
Yeah.
Well, right, because he knows, he's done it, right? We're talking about 6 years. He's grown it, right? So
why do I have to do it this way when I've been doing it this way?
It's human nature.
It is human nature, and I also think there's ego in it. So
yes, absolutely.
I'm an egomaniac, so my way is the right way. So from that standpoint, what the only thing I could rely on as his advisor was a record, right? Evidence. So I could only give him evidence by giving him trackable history and measurable results that we had with other clients. Right. So that's a really interesting story to kind of like answer maybe all the questions that we're talking about. Is when's the right time to start it? Well, today is. Does it work? Yes, it works. How do you know? Because it has evidence of itself that it works. How do you know when it's not working? Is when it feels wrong and you have to upscale your next system, right? Or put in a new component.
Yeah.
So
or you have to dig for the answers.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Like lack of evidence almost.
Yep.
But as with any change, right? So it's also affected by time. So you can't just make a change, wait for a couple of days and say, oh, that didn't work. Let me go back to my old system. So what would you say is a reasonable amount of time to vet if something is truly working or not?
Yes. So, I think, okay, so how I would answer that question, it depends, right? So it's just like a shitty bottle of wine. Open it up and you let it aerate and it's going to taste different. Hopefully it doesn't taste like crap, but it's going to change its taste. So you have to let it breathe, right? The idea of a system is you really have to let the system breathe a little bit. And we've heard this before. So trust in the system, right? If I can get my team members to trust in the system, they can see it work. The more that they fight it and resist, there's frustration and toleration that exists. They're not allowing the system to actually work. They're frustrating against it.
Yeah.
So if they embrace it quicker, it will be a short time. If they struggle against it, it will be a long time.
That makes, if they always struggle against it, it's never
going to
end. Yeah. That's a really good point. So if you can get your team to adapt to it, there's probably at some point this like aha moment where there's this positive gratification and then they kind of get bought into the process. But in order to get there, you have to probably break a lot of bad habits.
And how do you do that?
Well, the answer to that is the second part of our series, right? You have somebody that you can rely on, either a subordinate or a superior or a team member that you can bounce information off of, right? So it's neither good nor bad. It's just, the answer to the question is neither good nor bad, right? The answer to the question is just feedback. How you accept it is how you accept it basically determines whether it's negative or positive for you. So if you can just recognize that the system doesn't care, the system's neither good nor bad, that team member can kind of embrace it. And the idea of talking more, we're big here on communication and being open and being able to talk about things. So we just put a side note. So we just put a new rule in effect. So I have agreements with everybody, or I should say the company as an entity has agreements together. So we did this at the beginning of this year. So we wrote 9 agreements. Let's be fair. I wrote the 9 agreements. And then I asked everybody if they would adopt them, but we went through them one by one. Something as simple as no cell phones and computers in update meetings, right? So that's an idea that we could get around and talk about. Why is a meeting with cell phones and computers that should be an update meeting so frustrating for everyone in the room? No one wants to admit it, right? But also no one wants to not bring their phone. So those kinds of conversations can be had at leadership level all the way down to secretarial level, right? And they're all in agreement. So what we've done in just utilizing that as a concept in the company, it's changed the culture so that the secretarial staff has the same weight as the leadership staff, as the founders, right? They could actually make those changes. So to answer your question, full circle comes back is that it's by talking.
Yeah.
Right? If your system's not working for you, let's talk about it because it might be working for somebody sitting right next to you.
Yeah. That's interesting because a lot of times when there's a problem in an organization, right, the first instinct is, oh, I need to bring something in, like a consultant. I need to I need to have a sit down with this person and tell them, to either get out or join the team. But like, I love how you're not just talking to them. You're saying that you have these agreements that like literally you talk to them about like, this is what we're going to do from now on.
Conversations.
Like
it's not,
and this is why. And, this is the impact to the business when we do A versus B. And do we all agree that we're going to do it from now on? And not only does that communicate that you're not just making it up just because, you just like to exercise your power, but there is a business reason.
Because I'm the dictator, right?
Let's be honest, we all do. But I love that it also fosters some kind of accountability because you agreed during the meeting. Why are you bringing your phone now, right?
It fosters the accountability not from me to you, but from you to you.
Yeah.
So you're accountable for yourself because you're in this case, you're bringing the phone in. So that might be an offshoot of the same answer, bringing it back to standardized systems. One of our agreements was nothing can be changed inside what's already developed, whether it's a system or a client or a vendor or a tenant. Nothing can be changed in what we do unless there are 3 people in a room. And it needs to be the 2 people who are discussing it and someone from leadership.
Yeah.
And at that point, it can be adopted, and then it needs to be brought out to the group, not for debate, but because it was adopted. Right.
That's a really smart idea because you don't want everybody involved, but you also don't want the opposite where it's one person making decisions without any type of influence from other parties that might be involved or other people that just have good ideas.
Sure. You 2 are sitting in the bookkeeping department and you're next to each other and you see the problem. You talk, you fix the problem, but now no one else knows.
Yeah.
So now I create by bringing you something. I create my own problem because I don't know that you fixed something.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the business. The standardized systems, or whatever we want to call it, provides the company, the entity, right, to be of integrity, and not integrity in good or bad, but integrity in it's integral. It's completely closed. It's whole.
Yeah.
Right. If you take a component out of there, then you're out of integrity. Right. So what we try to do is kind of put it all together.
Yeah, no, it makes sense because I feel like we've all been in situations, no matter if you're a property management company or a marketing company or an accounting company, whatever, no matter what it is, I'm sure that there have been conversations with team members where somebody said, oh, I didn't know, or nobody told me, or things like that. And this is one of the ways that you can avoid that as much as possible. I'm sure there will still be situations
of course,
where something goes over somebody's head, that happens too, but minimizes that from happening.
You can't take the human out of us, right? So we're all being human.
Yeah.
We need to take that human and stop when we're interacting with other people and kind of have it be, it occurs to me that, we've always done it that way. Why do we always do it that way? Right. Then that conversation gets better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. So with the optimized processes and the communication, what are some of the biggest impacts you see happening on businesses? Like, for example, you may not have any information to share yet, but from your client that you were talking about, it might not have been long enough, but is there any successes you can share?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a bunch come to mind. So he's one, right? Because it's been a year and 3 months, right? Probably a lot longer than he wanted or imagined, but he's solid, right? He knows what he has. Not
and
only
it's
can
working now.
It was working before, but badly.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah. So now we can track some stuff back. So now his lien holders, the banks who would have foreclosed on otherwise, are happy. Right. So he might not be bringing in the money he wanted necessarily into his pocket, but his business is stable. So that next year he can start bringing more money into his pocket. Right. So that's a big one. And like I said, I was at a table with his lien holders a competitor who's also working on the business, and my partner who's a lawyer. So we were talking about all these kinds of things, right? Kind of a coalition, right? Which is
a round table of sorts.
Yeah, right. So it's amazing to actually just have that and recognize that we've come, as a company, we've come so far to be able to even be honored enough to be at that table, right? It's not it wasn't a networking event. It wasn't a sales thing, but guess what? I'm going to get new business out of it easily, right? So that's one thing, again, happened today. The other thing is at the end of last year. So when you scale, and I've talked to Alex and Jordan about this for the last 5 years, in and out, and I didn't recognize it till where I am now. So we're at, say, 600 doors, plus a number of law clients, plus a number of sales transactions that happens, plus 20 community management contracts, which totals up maybe 3,000 doors, right? I could not have recognized what me and Alex and Jordan were talking about, say, 5-6 years ago, about scalability, right? Your business changes from 150 units to 300 units. It changes again at 500. It changes again at 1,000. So some experience I recently had with national company showed me a little bit more of that scalability, or sometimes lack of scalability, right? You think it scales and then it breaks, right? But to that national company's credit, you think it scales, it breaks, but it's because you have a system that you can react to it quick enough, right? And actually fix what broke. So I'm experiencing a lot of that now. So we bought a huge batch of contracts at the end of 2019. We bought a community management, property management company at the end of 2019. Integrating that staff, those clients, and their process could not have gone well if we didn't have a system to rely on, right? The hardest thing was what you said before, was about its fear.
Yeah.
And the new people come to the table who already had their system.
And so do you have a standardized way to talk to those people to open up their minds? Because there's fear, but there's also, as you said, ego, right? And so you can't fight ego with ego. It just ends up blowing up in its face.
Right.
And so how do you approach that?
With who? Give me an example of who.
So as you mentioned, when you're saying you're buying contracts, you're just buying the contracts, or you're also inheriting some staff?
When we bought a company, we inherited staff. When we bought the contracts, we inherited clients.
So when you inherited staff, understandably, they've been working there for a decade or two, and they're kind of set in their ways, and there's this fear of are they just going to look for the first reason to let me go? And then they have
a lot of experience already.
They have a lot of experience, and they feel like they're quote unquote useless because they don't know all your new systems. How do you show them in a kind way that, hey, we're not attacking you. It's not you against us.
Have you talked to them? Have you talked to them? Have you talked to them? Because that's exactly what happened.
You don't know the secret email threads between.
Seriously, they're going around me and talking to you guys.
Yeah.
So there's two things, right? It's actually one thing. It's transparency. So there's a level of confidentiality, and you want to do contracts, and there's one side of the table and two sides of the table. You hope, you have an intention of a win-win situation. So we were lucky enough in that situation to be open enough that the other side saw how transparent we were, and they were also. So the contract itself became very open, so that their employees and our employees could see the language, the culture of the language in it. Maybe not the numbers, right? But the culture of the language. So we were very transparent about it, and so were they. When their staff came on board, there was a lot of tension, especially with one employee. Not negative tension, just anxiety, right? So we could show her, in this case, that we had already been doing successfully what she was doing at a grander scale. So she could trust us that if we were going to change something, that we had evidence that it would work. But we also gave her the opportunity to bring over her stuff the way it was, and integrate how she did it with how we did it, so that she could see both pros and cons, right? All the while, I know that I'm not going to use her way. I'm going to do it my way, but I made it her choice, right? And her team around her. So I really wasn't even involved. After she came on board, I wasn't involved. I let that go because it was transparent that we're going to move towards that. And I let her new team around her show her the benefits of the way we did it.
Yeah.
And guess what? There were some things that we kept the way she wanted to do it.
Interesting.
Is it almost like giving your team or an individual a little bit of freedom to make some mistakes in the beginning so that they're able to learn why they should be doing it your way? I don't know if that's the right way to ask it.
That's one of my, I'm not proud to say, one of my favorite sayings is "I told you so." So
Everyone hates hearing it.
Yes, I grew up with a mother.
I mean, I usually say it in my head, but
no, I say it out loud.
I can see you saying it out loud.
Yeah. So I will give.
I have a look.
Yeah.
I don't
look,
say it. I'm just like.
Yeah. Right. That's good. That look right there. That's it. So I don't mind saying it. I'll give, and it's, with love and caring, but it is a little bit tongue in cheek because it's like, I told you so, right? I'll give you enough leash in this instance, right? I'll give you enough latitude to try it your way. No, this is the way that we want it done. The there's consequences to both sides, right? So their consequences are pretty, I don't want to say dramatic, but we've got a high level of, in this business, you guys do too, because you're representing me, right? So you got a high level of responsibility in this relationship. So they've got a resident, they've got a client, they've got an affiliate partner and a vendor that they have to deal with. If they see a different way to do it, go ahead and try it. But recognize that this is a business. We have to be profitable, right? Most of the time, they will come back and fall into that system the way that we want it. And it doesn't happen that often because we like to educate. So we like to sometimes ad nauseum. We like to talk a lot. We like to philosophize about the business. So we'll give everybody an opportunity. So I like to call this, our business, a democratic dictatorship. Right? So what Dave and Rob say at the end goes, but you guys can talk about it and make policy and changes and figure it out. If it makes sense for residents, clients, and our vendors, we'll adopt it.
And that's where you have the three people in the room again.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Democratic dictatorship. Is that what we are?
Maybe. But who's
right?
a dictator?
Me. I like that though. And that did answer my question.
Good.
Because there is, I feel like a lot of times, and I mean, I feel like we keep going back to the fear, and the last kind of piece of our conversation has turned more into the people than the system, but I feel like
it always goes back to the people.
It always
people
goes
is
back
what,
to the people.
Well, because we're assets. You're assets. I'm an asset, right? So I might be at the top, but I'm still an asset. So what you guys do and think matter, right? So anybody at the top of your company, if they don't listen to you, they're losing valuable energy in you guys being an asset.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's so interesting because apart from that fear of not being nimble, that fear that it's rigid, just the concept of standardization gives people this idea that, oh, everything is gonna, like, your voice doesn't matter anymore because we're doing it this way. Like, we have the law of the land, and that's how we're doing it just because I said so, you know?
Right.
What's interesting is people, I feel like, reject standardization because that's just the connotation. Whereas in the realm of business, that's not how you do it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think some people reject standardization too because it's it's more gratifying to be creative and do different things sometimes. And it's fun to do that for a while. But then I think after people do that, you get to that aha moment or I told you so moment where people are like, man, this was cool for a while, but it sure is taking me a lot longer and my work is building up and I didn't get to X because I was spending too much time on Y. So I think that's why I really like the kind of leash we were talking about, giving them like that little bit of opportunity to do
some autonomy. It's really autonomy, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about, right? So it's not fun to lose business consistently over and over and over, no matter how creative you are, right? So we're in this business to make some money, right? We're in this business to serve, and by serving, we get money. So that's great. So I want to do that more. So the failing, we should be failing forward, right? To use a trendy, clever term, but we should be failing forward to correct those mistakes. So I'm also a professional development coach, right? The idea of transparency in this conversation is bringing. There's two things. It's trust and faith, right? You have to have faith. To have faith, it's pretty much blind, right? There's no evidence of it. It's a feeling that I'm just going to go with it, and I know it's going to work out. Trust is different. Trust needs evidence. So I can provide two things to my team. Faith, if I'm a good leader, right? And I can get them around what I want to do as a leadership thing and go over the hill, right? Because they can't see what's over the hill. The other piece of that, it's kind of like a yin yang thing, is trust. So my system, they can trust because they can look back and say, oh, this is where it succeeded. This is where it failed. This is how it's changed. So there's that evidence. So now not only can I garner faith in somebody new, I can garner trust almost immediately. And I could do that with clients, right? So again, we start out the podcast with standardized systems. We're going to talk about spreadsheets, and we're going to talk about Buildium over Appfolio. We're going to talk about Outlook and a calendar and all that stuff. That is all that, right? But it's how you incorporate it into your culture.
Yeah. Very well said. Let's transition away from the people for a second and back to just the things that you standardize. What have you found that you should not standardize? Is there something, maybe a whole process or a piece within a process that you tell your team? I guess it's kind of hard because there's still standardization in non-standardization.
You answered it before, and I think we were talking about it. It's the standardization gives you the rails or the boundary, and knowing that if you go outside of that, then it gets risk. So it's about risk, right? So if you stay within those boundaries, you're lowering the risk based off of history. If you go outside those boundaries, you're increasing the risk. So it's not about being risk averse, right? It's about welcoming that risk and not being risky all the time. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, I have not found anything that we can't standardize. Now, we're talking about it a lot here, and I think, listeners might be thinking that I've got, spreadsheets and computer programs and apps everywhere. I don't. I'm pretty fluid. I'm pretty spontaneous. But the only reason why I can be comfortable in being fluid and spontaneous is that I have a critical thought in my critical thinking towards the business. I can spend more time there because I know the staff and the business runs on some standard policies and procedures, right? Or software, right? Or an understanding of, you spend money on the credit card out here, it has to go here in order to get paid back, in order to be tracked correctly. So it's an education process. So I don't think there's anything that can't be standardized. Right. I think depending on who does it, I think it could be not a lot of fun, right? So I like to have a lot of fun, and I don't think we can have fun until we know what the business is. Yeah.
You can't have fun while you're figuring it out if you get a new issue that you have to figure out the process for. That sometimes that can be fun, but sometimes it can be really frustrating.
I'm better at being an entrepreneur personally, that phase of being an entrepreneur, because I get jazzed up about changing the business and elevating it, right? So I'm in a process now of, I look at myself as an entrepreneur. We're launching a business because I've doubled 3 different departments. So it is a totally different business. Yeah. So that's really exciting to me. So where you and I are going to be working together over the next 12 months for content management and building that business, I'm going to need to take a break in 12 months, and then it's going to get boring, and we'll probably grow a hell of a lot. We'll do it again 3 years from now, right? So it kind of gives you time to go back to the question before is, how do you know when the right time is? You got to let it breathe.
I feel like we've kind of
we beat a dead horse.
What?
We beat a dead horse.
We beat the standardization to the brim. I don't even know if that's a saying. Well, because we also, like you said a couple minutes ago, we have this part 2 where we're going to talk about how do you do this, and what do you look for. So I guess as we convince people that standardization
is not what they think it is. Yeah. It's not this rigid box. And I love the imagery that you use. They're railings, right?
Yeah.
They're not boxes. And you're allowed to jump over the railings sometimes, but if you spend 24/7 outside the railings, you should start asking yourself why.
Right.
The railings are there for a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, so to our listeners, thank you for joining us for today's podcast.
Yep.
Watch out for the next one with Dave. He's going to be giving us ideas on like best practices on actually how to standardize your business.
Yep. You will not want to miss it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, guys. It was awesome. Thank you.
Hello, podcast listeners. It's Marie and Brittany again. If you like the podcast topics that we cover and you're interested in learning how to grow your business, make sure you go to PM Grow Summit 2020 this May.
Yep. Not only will you learn from some amazing speakers and other industry leaders of the PM world, you'll also get to meet Marie and I in person.
So, if you're hungry for growth or just want to take selfies with us, make sure you get your tickets at pmgrowsummit.com.
We hope to see you there.